Hey, while you're doing that, Rob,
Go ahead. Did you want me to stop the recording?
no, it's okay. I just
Okay.
wanted to let everyone know that last Saturday I had the honor of attending an awards ceremony where Dr. Darrow was recognized. And so I didn't understand this award, so I'm going to read it. This award is the Hilda Tabo Award. It is the highest honor that is awarded to a Californian who has made a significant contribution to social studies education in California. So I just want to congratulate Rob on that great award, and it's well deserved. It was an honor being there present. Fortunately, the award ceremony was in Southern California, about 20 minutes from my house, so it made it easy. And then Rob treated us to dinner afterwards. That was even better. So
Thank you. Yep. So that's the award I told you all about in the last class. So it was a fun night. It was good that Glenn and other people could be there. With that, great. We got that on the recording. It's on there for posterity. So thanks, Glenn. So the first part for all of us, what we always do is we always have each person introduce themselves and talk a little bit about the topic, which is history, social science, and wow. Now, Glenn, you caught me off guard now, right? So talking about race, privilege, gender, and sexual orientation in the K-8 history classroom. And so just to start off, why don't you just introduce yourself? And Glenn, you can start since you started that, and then you can pick the next person, and just share anything else you'd like to about your history of being on this panel, and then we'll jump into the other questions that the students have.
okay, I'm Glenn Nishibayashi. I'm going to make this really quick because I know Aisha has to run, but I'm a longtime friend of your professor here. We went to college together. And then I'll get into my story later, Rob, because I think Aisha needs to has
Okay.
important responsibilities to take care of later.
Okay. Aisha, are you there? Uh-oh, maybe she moved to her important responsibilities and will come back. All right, let's jump over to Tyler and then Blanca and then see. Oh, wait, there's Aisha.
So sorry, friends. It is Ramadan, so I'm super thrown off. So I hope everything that I says today makes sense. I just needed my glasses so I could quit squinting.
Mm.
All of you.
So please introduce yourself and tell us all about Ramadan.
I shall.
Well, not all about it, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. My name's Aisha. I use she, her pronouns. Last name is Sharves. I'm from the US. My family is Hispanic and Scottish. We're like third and fourth generation. I have been Muslim for, I don't want to say how long, because then that dates me and I have a secret age that I don't tell anyone. So we'll just say I'm on more than 20 Ramadans under my belt. And for Ramadan, Muslims wake up super early in the morning. We eat before dawn, and then we don't eat again until dusk. It's generally abstaining from like your base human nature, your animal nature. So we don't eat or drink, have sex, smoke. Hopefully we don't swear during the day, although that's also a hard one for me. And I really miss coffee a lot. On to the next person, since I definitely lost my train of thought there.
Okay, great.
Oh, I have two dads. Also a very important thing about me. I'm an advocate for the LGBTQ plus community.
All right, Tyler, then Blanca, and then I'm going to ask you the main question that you can all answer.
So am I making this quick because traditionally we've done like a long intro?
I know. Yeah, but we do it different every time. So yeah.
All right, well, I'll continue with the trend that we have going on today. Tyler Williamson here. I am the mayor of Monterey. Got elected in 2022 as mayor. I first got elected into elected office in 2018 to the Monterey City Council. And interestingly enough about that story is people came up to me right away after I got elected as a council member and they're like, we need you to run for mayor. And I'm like, nope, not interested. So how council works, there's 5 seats. One of them is the mayor. Um, all of us have equal power in regards to votes. So the idea of running for mayor was just like, I wasn't really interested. Like my vote didn't change, but yet had more responsibility. You're the figurehead of the city. Um, and so it wasn't until there was an idea around changing the makeup of the council. I was like a 1-4, maybe a 2-3 in the minority vote on some pretty important things in our community. But the idea came up that, hey, if I run for mayor, I could change the makeup of the council. So that's what kind of motivated me to do that, and got elected, and I'm up again this year. So mayor's term is 2 years, and I'll be running for re-election in the fall. So yes, fingers crossed for that. And I my mom served in the Navy. I was born in a naval hospital. I have 3 brothers. Um, and so never lived anywhere for more than 4 years my entire life, just kind of bounced all over the place until I moved to Monterey in 2010. So just feel super fortunate to be able to live in such a beautiful place with beautiful people. I have so much to my story. I worked for President Obama, which is kind of what got me inspired to get involved in politics in the first place. And part of the LGBTQ community got Monterey Peninsula Pride going in its current iteration in 2017, and we've been hosting a Pride every year since. So again, I could go on. I'm a politician. I like to talk, so I'm just gonna stop and allow Blanca to go.
Well, why don't you expand a little bit more, and then we'll move on to Blanca, and then we'll go back to Glenn and Aisha to share the other part of the
I don't even know
stories.
where to go, Rob. There's
So
so
a
many
little about
different
your
rabbit holes to
story,
go down.
your memories
Um,
from your elementary history classes, and
yeah,
any other experiences growing up in the US. So
I mean,
you also went to CSU Monterey Bay, right?
I did go to CSU. I'm a CSUMB grad. I majored in human communications, concentration in pre-law. But if I were to go back in my story, what I would say is that both of my parents are from upstate New York, but my dad migrated to Albany. His family migrated to Albany when he was 12. So he's from Mississippi. He's one of 12 kids. His oldest brother, he was born in the 40s. His oldest brother would talk back to white people in Mississippi in the 50s. And his parents thought he was going to get himself killed. So they had neighbors that had family that lived up in Albany, and they asked them if they could help arrange something to help him move up there. So he moved up there, saved up enough money, and purchased a car, drove back down, picked up the entire family, and that's how my whole dad's family migrated up to Albany. And then just thinking back on my experience in grade school, in of learning history, right? I don't think it's changed terribly too much today, but I think there's been some progress in this area. You know, Thanksgiving, is just kind of like the classic example that I think of in regards to just kind of the shift in how we learn history, and not really fully being able to appreciate what really happened during those experiences until later in life. And then just being a Black person and seeing how Black people were portrayed, and the failure of being able to make that connection of our history and how that affects us still today. It just kind of made a huge impact in regards to my life and how I saw the world. And this is particularly important because a lot of the schools that I went to growing up were either military schools, like schools that were operated by the government, or were in communities that were integrated with communities that were heavily that had heavy okay, I can say this, a heavy proportion of students that were military students. And so, I tended to go to pretty diverse schools, and yet there was still that kind of lack of representation. And then just the last point that I would make is like about around the LGBTQ community. I identify as gay, and when I look back at the history that was taught around the LGBTQ plus community in grade school, it was like a paragraph in the history book. It was like uh, you barely thought about it. And again, there wasn't that lack of connection of, hey, this is what's happened historically, and how does that relate to discrimination that still exists and persists today? Um, can I stop there? Should I stop
Great.
there?
No, that's
Can I
great.
go on?
No, I think that's important. Those were the important parts. And
Okay.
the bigger question that you answered, and Hope and Blanca, we'll move on to you, is, did you see yourself in your history classes? And if so, how did you see yourself? So we'll turn over to Blanca to hear about who you are and your story.
Hi, Rob and everyone. So I'm Blanca. I was born in Mexico and came here when I was 3 years old. I was undocumented until I was in high school. And my dad worked in the strawberry fields of Watsonville. That's where we came. And my mom worked in the cannery. And I'm the oldest of four. And I know I did not see myself represented in the history books, not until I was in college and I started taking Chicano studies and Mexican American history. And my grandfather, we ended up in Watsonville because my grandfather was part of the Bracero program and he had been to many different states. But he ended up living in Watsonville because it was very similar to our home state in Michoacan, a small town by the name of Quiroga. And, I think of my personal experiences dealing with immigration, almost being deported. And, there was none of that in school, in terms of just the harm that the federal government was doing or did to Mexican people, but yet would want to bring him here to do their labor when there were shortages. And so I think my story, like many immigrants, is very important. And I think it's getting a little bit better in representation. There's at least more independent history books that are by different publishers that are trying to get their stories told. And we're telling our own stories, so nobody's telling the stories for us. But I think what I want to share about my education, though, is that in fourth grade, for the first time, I had a teacher who looked like me, and it made a big difference because she really changed the trajectory, I think, for me and how she saw me. She understood me, she heard me, and she created a pathway where I was now going to be seen as someone who was, in air quotes, smart, as opposed to being a chatterbox in my classes. And so teachers are and play such an important role, and building relationships with students is so key. It's not just about delivering the content and teaching. It's about getting to know your students, building those relationships so that they do feel that sense of belonging, even when sometimes the curriculum may not represent them.
Great. Aisha, how about we go back to you and you talk a little bit about how you saw yourself in history, and maybe you could talk a little bit about the different jobs you've had as well, because I didn't ask the other people that, but I should have. Just talk a little bit about your journey to where you are today and how you've seen yourself in history or not.
Yeah, thank you. When I was younger, I think most of all, I felt that there was a dissonance between what I was being taught in history and what I later found out was real history. And I basically stay mad over that and make sure that I share those things that I know now that I was taught wrong in school. This is a huge passion of mine because, when I grew up and I found out the truth about the mission projects, I felt so angry that we had been taught they were something completely different, right? When I went to school and they told me, and they made heroes out of the US government driving indigenous peoples out of where I grew up in northern Idaho, I was able to see as a young person that what I was when they made the US government army kicking out Chief Joseph and all of his people and chasing them, and they told me that those were the good people, I didn't believe it. And I got into a lot of trouble when I was a young person from being someone who pushed back on those ideas. And now I make a hobby out of that. So that's probably my upside. And I think a lot of it was because at the same time when I was questioning that, I went to a private school. And when I was 11, my dad came out and he moved to Santa Cruz and met my other dad, and they've been together ever since. And I also didn't see non-traditional families represented around me. And because I lived in a conservative place and I went to a private school, the people there were very anti-LGBTQ. And so it was really freeing to me to finally go to high school in California, my senior year, and be around more people for whom that wasn't terrible or bad or something I would constantly get into disagreements with people over. I didn't see gay history when I was young. There's so much to be said. And now because of that, because I'm such an advocate and a liberal Muslim, I studied Arabic so that I could really go and make these positive LGBTQ plus arguments in the Muslim community, in my faith, because queer people have always been there. LGBTQ plus folks, trans folks have always existed in history. And historically, we actually find a much better relationship with queer people in Islam anyways. I've had a lot of different jobs. When I was a teen, I was a lifeguard, and I worked at Disney World. That is where I converted to Islam after debating with people who were Muslim. I guess I both won and lost that debate, so that's cool. I was later an EMT for years. I worked on an ambulance up in Contra Costa County and Alameda County. That was a lot of fun. I went back to college when my friend, who was really smart and the valedictorian of our class, told me that I should go back to college and that I was smart, and she believed in me and she thought that I would really benefit from that. And it honestly, when I went to college and I got a Fulbright and I went abroad and I studied women's leadership and social change in Abu Dhabi, I very much dedicated that to my friend Eleanor, who told me to go back to college. Like, it was really an excellent experience. In college, I became the president of the Muslim Student Association and really found that instead of studying medicine and pre-med, I wanted to study community development, because being a leader and empowering other people in their leadership skills is something I felt really big about. I researched, like I said, I got a Fulbright. I researched women's leadership and social change in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. Abu Dhabi is the capital of the country that Dubai is in. I met my spouse there. We moved to Egypt, where I didn't really work because the economy doesn't really allow it. It's like $500 for me to work there a month, and I just couldn't do that. So I did a lot of journalism on the side, freelance journalism at the time. Eventually, I did event organizing in Abu Dhabi for a couple of years. We moved back there. That was totally fun. I got to meet important people and work at a hotel and like host events at the world's only 7-star hotel. Moved back to the US, worked at a couple of LGBTQ plus centers. And now I work in mental health, helping folks with mental health diagnosis find work, and also a free food bag program that empowers people to like have a healthy lifestyle.
Great, thanks for adding all that in. So I want to remind all the students in here, what I should have said at the beginning of this is that I hope you're jotting down some of the things that each of these people are saying, and that you find at least one quote they say at some point that you can add into that reflection that we've talked about. We're going to go back to Glenn, who can share a little bit about his history if he saw himself in history, and a little bit about your story.
Thanks, Rob. I'm just amazed every time I sit with this panel. I learn something new about each one of you, and I'm completely impressed each time I hear a little bit more about you. So I don't have anything new to add. I'm still the same old person that I've always been. But so how is my family's history represented in my education? I would say not at all. I'm a third generation Japanese American. My grandparents were the original immigrants from Japan. My parents were born here. My grandparents were the Issei generation. My parents were the Nisei generation. And I'm a member of the Sansei generation, the third generation. So, important part of my family history that was not reflected in my education, at least, was the treatment of Japanese Americans during World War II. My paternal and maternal grandparents both immigrated from Japan. My parents were born in Los Angeles, but during World War II, as a result of Presidential Order, Executive Order 9066 by FDR, my parents and grandparents were forced to leave Los Angeles and were sent to prison camps, which they euphemistically called internment camps or relocation centers at the time. And only because of their ancestry. No matter what percentage of your ancestry was Japanese at the time, they required you to go to these camps. And so they were given a few days' notice that they were told to pack whatever they could in whatever they could carry is only that which they could take. So my father's family was sent to Jerome, Arkansas. My mother's family eventually ended up in Heart Mountain, Wyoming. So as I visited the Heart Mountain, Wyoming center, I tried to imagine my mom coming from Los Angeles, ending up in Wyoming in the middle of winter, and what that would have been like for her. And my father at the time was 19. My mother was 17. My mother actually graduated from high school while at the internment camp, and she was named the valedictorian of her class. She was a very good student. I did not follow in her footsteps. My brother and sister did, but anyhow, so I was able to actually read a copy of her valedictorian speech that my nephew was able to find in what was published in the local camp newspaper. But anyhow, 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry were sent to the internment camps. Over 60% of those were U.S. citizens. My grandparents were not citizens at the time. They're actually restricted by law from becoming citizens or owning any property. My father, at the same time, his family was in the camps in Jerome, Arkansas. He enlisted into the United States Army, where he served in the Military Intelligence Service during World War II. He actually told a story to my wife saying that while he was serving, he would actually come back to visit his family in camp in full uniform. And in talking with one of the docents at one of the museums, they said that that was a very difficult thing for the officers, for the Army officers who were guarding the camps, whether or not they should salute my father, because he certainly outranked them as he came back as a lieutenant. So in the post World War II era, my dad actually interpreted the post-war crimes trials for General MacArthur. So Rob's asked me to talk about this before. A few years back, I was able to go to the visitor center in Heart Mountain, Wyoming, where my mother's family was put in prison, and actually saw a picture. As I was going through the museum, I was looking very carefully at all the pictures, trying to see a picture of my mother, and then came around the corner and saw this about 3 foot by 5 foot picture of the Heart Mountain, Wyoming Photography Club. And Rob is going to put the arrow right on the guy in the front. Oh, disappeared. Rob had a picture of that up there. And that's actually a picture of my grandfather in the front row, wearing the hat and glasses. Yeah, Rob's got the arrow right on there. So as I was touring that museum with my son, who's the one who actually wanted us to go to this camp to go visit it on our trip across the country, I actually told him, son, this is where your big ears come from, because my grandfather had enormous ears. So That's a picture of my grandfather, and that's Hart Mountain in the background that the camp was named after, that area is named after. So also we were there, we had a chance to, the docent gave us an aerial photograph of the camp, and overlaid on that was where all the barracks were. So I had the opportunity to go out to the site where my mother's family's barrack would have been, where they lived with another family, and actually stand on that location and imagine what it would have been like for my mother to be there as a 17-year-old and have to spend a couple years there in high school and finish her high school years at the camp. It was quite a moving experience for me to stand there and realize and acknowledge the fact of what they had to experience, what my grandparents and my mother and my father, all of them that had to experience that being put behind barbed wire during World War II. And then since then, in the Japanese American National Museum, there's a book called the Irecho, and it's the book of names. It's an honorable book of names of all those who were put into the World War II internment camps. And in that book, you're allowed to go in there and find the name of your relative and actually put a little dot next to their name in recognition of what they experienced during that time. And Rob had the opportunity. I was honored to make an appointment for Rob to come down, and he actually was able to stamp the names of my parents because he knew my parents. So that was quite a great experience to have Rob being able to do that for me. So that's kind of during my high school career. Perhaps I wasn't paying attention in class, but I don't remember any of that World War II experience of the Japanese Americans being taught while I was in high school. Of course, that was a long time ago. I understand that since then that's become part of the curriculum, but not quite sure how extensively people go into studying under that. Anything else, Rob, you want me to talk about?
Nope, I think that's pretty good. I'm just going to add that for those of you that sometimes get down to Los Angeles, the Japanese American History Museum in LA is pretty powerful. So as are different museums we have across California.
And if you want to go there, I'd be happy to host you there.
There you go. There's your open invitation to all of you. I'm going to bring in Nalita, who's going to ask the first question from our students here.
Yeah, firstly, thank you all so much for being here. I'm so grateful to be able to hear from you all. And I know I speak on behalf of my peers. I'm sorry, peers, for doing that, but I think it's amazing that you all are here. So thank you. And thank you to Dr. Darrow for having you all. One of the most important questions I think that we kind of collectively joined in on here was, what are the ways to help educators become confident teaching these topics in the classroom? And it's a two-part because it's complicated as it is, right? I'm sorry about that. But how then do you get your parents and administrators to buy in on these conversations? Because there's a discussion before you all arrive that it is still a little tricky. It's tricky to talk about these things.
We always make Blanca answer this question.
So I didn't share, but my background is that I was a high school teacher and then an administrator, actually a teacher, then counselor, then administrator in K-12. But I'm currently now, this is my 28th year as an educator, and I am now a dean at Cabrillo College, where I attended school many years ago. So as the educator, and I'm assuming you're talking about controversial topics, Nalita, yeah. So definitely, I would want to make sure that you do have the support of your administrative team at the site level. And I think part of the way you get there is that you all do professional development together around these topics. I always went to professional development with the teachers I supervised so I could learn about the curriculum, I could learn about the new standards, I could learn if there was going to be anything that may be controversial. Because if we don't know as administrators, and we've been administrators for a long time, our way of thinking may be different, right, than what you are all being exposed to in teacher education courses, right? And so I think it's important that administrators also have the opportunity to learn side by side so that that dialogue can start. And when it comes to, for example, when Rob helped us in our district incorporate some LGBTQ history into our middle school courses and high school courses, the one thing that we had to always reiterate was that this was history, that these were events, these were real people, these were their contributions in history. And so it was just like teaching, you know, what Martin Luther King Jr. did, or what, you know, any contributions, right? And so we had to change the narrative of like, because a lot of the parents or the pushback was like, oh, you're trying to turn my student gay, or you're trying to brainwash them, or you're trying, it's like, no, here's the curriculum. This is where, these are the contributions of these fearless leaders. And you kind of like have to kind of repeat that narrative over and over again. And I think it's also important to build, like earlier I said, building those relationships with your students early on, so that when you do have these conversations, they can take them from a place of like, you're doing your best and you have their best interest in mind, right? So relationships with your administrator, having them learn with you, building those relationships with your students and with your parents too. But at the end of the day, what I would say is, if you had a parent that was super angry, you don't have to address it alone. You know, that is why there's administrators there that can support you. And let's just say your site administrator didn't support you, then there's district level administration. And I would assume there has to be someone there. If there isn't, there are other organizations that can provide support. But that would be, it's a very complicated situation that I can't give like an easy answer to, but it's really building that knowledge set and those relationships with the people that really need to have your back.
Tyler, I wonder if you want to add into that, maybe from your public persona and how you've dealt with people who have different opinions than you do as a public official or in your work with Monterey Pride.
That never happens. What are you talking about?
It's all right. So you just give that aura and nobody bugs you, right?
Exactly. No, I was going to say two things. First, is I think I always find value in learning from other students in the class, right? Like the classes that I've always appreciated the most were the professors that created a space in almost every class setting where it would be, so there would be some lecturing, but there would also be an opportunity for us to sit in a circle and hear people's experiences or reflections on different things. I mean, there's something super valuable about learning from a room of 20 people as opposed to just one person. And so through that experience, people are able to share their stories and backgrounds, being from different perspectives, which was super valuable. So I just kind of encourage that. And then I think about the whole experience that happened in Spreckles. And so for those that may not have a full background and awareness what happened there, Spreckles is a town in Monterey County. And God, how long ago was this, Rob? I can't even remember how long ago. I mean, 4 years ago now?
4 or 5 years, yeah.
4 or 5 years ago. there were two teachers, and I might get some of the details around this not fully correct. So correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but there was two teachers who went to a conference and were secretly recorded. And then what they said was taken and twisted by right-wing media, and that got back to the school district. And one of the things that they did was they actually had like a GSA at the Gay Straight Alliance at the school, and provided a safe space for queer folks to be able to come together and feel supported. And so in reaction to this becoming a huge media thing, the school administration ended up telling kind of disbanding the club and putting the two faculty members on administrative leave. And they were basically essentially like disciplined for providing a safe space. And one of the complaints that was used, there was, of course, you can imagine parents that were upset at the idea that you're kind of allowing these teachers to kind of create an environment where they can make their children gay. And there was a lot of backlash. But then there was also, I think, a counter backlash from a lot of queer organizations. There was a joint letter that was drafted by a couple of LGBTQ plus organizations in the community to kind of counteract that. So I don't know if it's getting directly to the question, but that's what this question made me think of, was this is exactly the kind of thing that can happen if maybe there's not that real intentionality like that Blanca just described, and like really like working with the administration, getting that support, finding those organizations to help support the effort. I had the honor of being able to meet both of these teachers at an event. We were on a panel together, and just hearing their story and their perspective was super powerful. I don't think they said it, they wouldn't have changed their experience for the world, because they stood up for the right thing. And so, and nothing that I'm saying just is describing how they did things incorrectly. But it just kind of shows why this is such a good question, right? You want to try to avoid these types of things as much as possible. And the fact of the matter is that there are people out there. There's a reason why these groups that are historically discriminated against are still discriminated against. It's not just history. It's not just something that happened in the past. It's something that still happens to today. And so it just describes the need for us to continue fighting the good fight and continuing to push it. So
could I ask you to also talk about that one city council meeting where those people came in and how you handled that?
The one city council meeting.
The Zoom meeting that the news wrote about.
Oh, that one. Yes.
Yes, that one.
I'm like, I don't know which one. There's such a history here. And actually, before I tell that story, I just want to share with you all. So I have two other, so there's my seats up as mayor, and there's two council seats that are up. And so I've developed like a slate essentially of folks that are going to run with me for the council seats. So I'm hopeful, I'm really optimistic that the three of us are going to get elected in November, and it's really going to kind of allow us to kick things into high gear. So one of them is a white guy, and he called me this weekend, and he had shared with me that they heard grumblings of folks kind of more conservative in the community actively looking to find people to run against, to run for the seats, but in particular running against me as the mayor. And as he's telling me the story, I mean, without going into all the details, the people that are reaching out to talk to him don't really know him as well yet, because he's not currently elected. But they like make these assumptions about him. And so they come to him and like they see a white guy who's married to a woman and has kids. And so it's like, oh, your family values, and like this assumption that he's kind of with their argument. And it's so funny because they don't know. And so we're sitting here like debating, do we act like I don't know, right? Like, do we play on this, right? To like have the advantage here in regards to knowledge, So anyways, there's a whole conversation to be had there, but like, again, this is the dynamic, right? Like the first ever African American to be elected to the Monterey City Council, the first openly LGBTQ person to be elected to the city council. And there's a couple of experiences that have happened along the way. And so getting back to your question here, Rob. So I'm sure many of you have heard about a lot of local councils. This has happened across the country where they will get Zoom bombed because Zoom became a thing during the pandemic. And so as of late, a lot of them have been focused on kind of like this white nationalist perspective. And so we're having our council meeting, we go out to public comment. We do public comment in the room first, in the chamber, and then we do it on Zoom. So we go online and people are giving their public comment. And then all of a sudden there's this guy that comes on and we're talking about, I think it was like our rental registry. So it was already kind of a controversial topic that kind of stokes some tension in the community. And then he starts talking and he just, I want to be careful. I don't want to actually repeat any of that messaging because it's not as important, but just know that it was hate speech, completely inappropriate, I think, for the public setting. And I'm going to get more to that point here in a second. And then what they would do is that they would hang up and then call back in. And so they wouldn't let our council meeting end. And so it was just one person after another, just kind of continuing, and they wouldn't let public comment end. And we have to, the way our rules are is that we have to let everybody have a chance to speak. Well, we caught on pretty quickly. We could tell the same voices. So we were able to find a way of like cutting them off. You've already spoken, and ending public comment. But then there was another item that came up and it happened again. And so we ended up like ending our council meeting early. And it's really unfortunate because it prevents the city, this public agency that's a democracy, from allowing the community as a whole to be able to move our business forward. So we came up with a couple of policies that help prevent that. A lot of jurisdictions have actually stopped allowing public comment via Zoom. And I just kind of feel like that's a disservice because the whole value of it is that it allows folks that might be from a disadvantaged group to be able to participate. If you're sick, for an example, if you are disabled, if you're, economically disadvantaged and you're probably working multiple jobs and you're trying to take care of your family, like your ability to be able to just like do the dishes, cook dinner, and then jump in and make your public comment on the phone while you're at home. It just makes it a lot easier and actually increase public participation. And so we wanted to be able to find a way of allowing that to continue to persist. But later on, we found out that the group that called in, it was it was a coalition of 3 different organizations. It was like Proud Boys, Make America White Again or something. And there was another group. And it was just kind of probably one of the worst experiences that I have gone through. So as it's happening, pretty quickly into the comments, I'm like, there's something wrong here. It's like inappropriate. And my eyes are like about to pop out of my head. And you're trying to balance this, right? Because on the one end, you want to be respectful of people's First Amendment rights, right? Like freedom of speech. That's the whole purpose of this public comment period. But at the same time, there could be a danger associated with that. So anyways, I'm looking at the city attorney like, what do I do? And essentially we were kind of stuck in a position where we kind of had to let them talk. Now, I was going to say I was going to reflect on something earlier, kind of some of the hate speech that was shared. So a few weeks later, I was a guest speaker for ACLU event. And I need somebody to help me out with what the acronym stands for: American Civil Liberties Union. And so they're all about your rights, your constitutional rights. And so I was describing this scenario and what happened at our council meeting. And I kind of tested the waters with the group because, again, they're all about individual freedoms. So they're really protective of things like First Amendment. So I threw out, I said, next time this happens, I'm not actually concerned about cutting somebody off with that type of speech. Because I find it to create harm within society. And it actually, I think, prevents people from, especially people that aren't fully engaged, to want to come back. Like, why would they want to endure hate speech? It's dangerous. And actually, I got support from the local ACLU chapter, because it does put us at risk of being legally liable for preventing somebody's First Amendment rights. But like, I care more about people in my community that are here to participate in the city's business. So there's a whole conversation to be had there. But yeah, that's what happened. And unfortunately, it hasn't happened again. Knock on wood. Because it was just so traumatic. I mean, I've had people in the community call me afterwards, like checking in on me, describing their own emotion and feelings. I actually remember the day after it happened, I had to stop by City Hall and I ran into a staff member and she came up to me and she goes, nobody's talking about anything else. Like people are distraught, like emotionally affected, our staff, right? And it's like, here are people signing up to be public servants, to provide public good, and they can't focus on their work because of the words that were used in a public setting. So anyways, that's a little bit of the story about what happened there.
So kind of to put a bow on this question related to what you just said, is you created a system within your organization how to handle that. And in this case, you shut the meeting down, figured out other policies so that you could be confident in allowing the kind of discourse that was appropriate in your community. Similar to how teachers can do the same thing in their classroom.
Absolutely. And I'll just kind of quickly describe what we did. We now put a cap on the total amount of time for public comments on each item. Each agenda item you're allowed to speak on during public comment. So we put a cap on that. And then we also ask everybody at the beginning of the public comment period to identify themselves. And then we close off the opportunity for anybody else to be able to speak. So like everybody gets a chance, but you have to identify yourself at the beginning of the public comment period, and then we shut it off and those people get to speak. So it's like a little bit more controlled, and there's a whole rule thing that we have to read through so that everybody understands what we're doing. So it kind of like extends the meeting a little bit, but it, I think, drew that line between like that balance between continuing to allow public comment via Zoom, but also kind of controlling the preventing people from like dropping off and calling back in and never letting council the public comment period end.
Great. Aisha or Glenn, anything else to add to this part?
I did want to mention, I like that you ask how do we talk about these hard things. It seems like, much to my surprise, suddenly there's a bunch of parents in the US who are interested in banning books that have been around for a really long time, books that have been used for a really long time, aren't really, in my perspective, that salacious, or books that include LGBTQ plus kids, like the Penguin book where the, little baby penguin has two dads. And I think for me, one of my favorite ways to include more people in solutions is just by connecting it to real people. Like my mosque isn't always super comfortable with the fact that I'm such an advocate for the LGBTQ plus community, but they also let me teach Sunday school there. Why? Because they also understood that in my community, family really matters, and it's my family that they're asking me. I mean, it's also my identity, but I don't have to always tell everyone that if it doesn't work for me. That they were more willing to be understanding based on the fact that it's my community and my two dads, and they were willing to include me in a lot of answers and in mosque leadership and everything. And with schools, I find that people, that it turns out a lot of the communities that we talk about can also be people in our community, right? There probably are children where you teach who have LGBTQ plus parents. There probably are people who are Muslim and fast during Ramadan, or who are Latino, so also just being able to honor the folks who are in your community. Sometimes I think it's a little farther with folks who have closed, I don't know, more stringent perspectives. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble finding good words since it is still just about 2 hours till I can have food and water today. So, coffee.
Glenn, any final thoughts on this topic before we go to the next question?
I'm just sorry that in our world we're having to go through all this. I'm sorry that, Tyler, you had to deal with it. I'm sorry that people are feeling enabled to be this hateful. But I think on the other side that we, just as vocal and as activist as they are being, on the other side, you need to be equally vocal and equally activist. As much as it might push us to go hide in a corner someplace, I think now's the time that we need to really come out of that corner and be advocates on the other side to make sure that everyone is feeling included. Because I'm very concerned about our society in the United States and maybe even in the world, but the United States in particular, that the fact that Tyler and his city council has to deal with this kind of speech. I know it's going on in my community also, at school board meetings, city council meetings, those kinds of things are going on. And I think we need to continue to be strong and to push for those who have not been represented before and who have not been represented in the history books and who have not been respected as human beings. So we need to keep fighting.
Great.
If I could just add
Go
a
ahead.
quick comment on what Glenn just shared. I appreciate your comments, Glenn. You know, sometimes you have to even fight harder and get more folks than the opposition to show up to these spaces. You know, depending on the type of public agency that you're working with and the makeup of their body. I mean, a council like mine, if you just get a few folks to show up, it doesn't have to be equal. Like just having that public voice makes a huge difference in allowing the folks that are on the right side of the issue to kind of push for things. But sometimes you don't have electeds that are on the right side of the issue. But I promise you all that folks showing up and participating in a public setting, it absolutely makes a difference. And the frustrating side of this is, and it's a matter of fact, kind of the more conservative mentality mindset, they organize very well. They're very motivated. And when we're trying to push for change, it's harder because you're having to educate and get folks to understand what that change means and looks like. But your voice really matters is the kind of the point that I'm trying to make. And so, you know, I just encourage and advocate for, you know, you don't have to even be aligned with my perspective and how I see the world, but it's just so important for folks to be engaged in the political process, particularly at the local level, because your voice makes so much more of a difference, right? Than as opposed to the national level. I was sharing earlier that I was inspired to get in politics because of Obama. But through my experience, I realized I'm paying attention to all this national stuff, which I have very little control over, but I can make a difference right here in my community. And so I just kind of encourage that.
So I want to circle back to something Blanca said at the beginning of this, just to kind of, and Blanca, if you want to add in here, that's fine. And we'll call that the finish to this question. But what I'm hearing, the combination of people say here is that to become more confident in this work is to find other people who are doing this work. So I would suggest that you heard Blanca talk about, you know, make sure your administrators, you've talked with your administrators and people like that. And there's always other people in schools that have similar thinking or similar ideas about social justice topics. So, you know, have conversations with them or reach out to people in your community or parents who have equal thoughts in this direction. And that's another way to build your own confidence. Any final thought there, Blanca?
Yeah, I think when you are kind of working with a parent that's upset about something, is like keep the focus on the facts and try and leave the emotion out of it, which is really hard to do. But the less emotional you are and the more you focus on your teaching objectives, and really just tell your narrative. Don't respond to them and their narrative. The way you respond is with your narrative and your teaching objectives and your activities. And it's terrible that you have to justify them, but just sticking to these are what the objectives are and this is how I'm doing it. And not letting the emotions get in there, because that's, I think, when things kind of start, you know, imploding. And that's really hard to do. So I think it's good to, one of the things we did is we did some role playing when we were going to incorporate some of the curriculum, and just role playing, like I'm a student and I'm going to say something negative in class, and how would a teacher like address that, or a parent's coming to you angry and role playing that. So it's like role playing with your colleagues, role playing with an administrator, anticipating what some of those questions might be. But the worst thing you can do is not address something that is happening in the classroom. So practicing that and anticipating what students may say is really important so that it's addressed. And maybe it's not getting into a full-on conversation right there in the moment, but it's like, I've heard you, that's not appropriate, and we're going to talk about it after class. Something to acknowledge that they're not, it wasn't appropriate, right? Because whatever they said may have harmed another student in the class. So yeah, like I said, it's very complicated, but just, it's a lot of practice. So I think role playing helps a lot with that.
A lot of practice. All right, Itzel's got some questions for us. So Itzel, I'll have you ask your questions. Itzel's not able to put on her camera today. So go ahead, Itzel.
Hi, like Nadila mentioned, thank you so much for taking your time for being here with us. And my apologies for not being able to turn on my camera. So some of the questions that we came up with all together was, what can we as teachers do to front load the information for our students related to uncomfortable topics? And how can we support students who may feel vulnerable during these discussions regarding those uncomfortable topics?
Rob, I'm so sorry. Could I get the second half of that question again? Sorry, friends. Since it is Ramadan, I got to start cooking now, or I won't be ready by 7:30.
That's great. We're happy to cook with you. We like food. We like food in these classes. So the first part is how do teachers, what can teachers do to front load information for students? And the second part is, how do we support students who may feel vulnerable during these discussions?
Thank you.
So I think I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning, which is about building community in your classroom. And then adding to that, and building community is like, it can be incorporated in 5 minutes at the beginning of every classroom, so that students start feeling comfortable with one another and learning about each other. And there's a whole lot of activities for that, building in that. But the other thing I was going to share is, Tyler hit on something earlier, which is about them sharing their stories. Because I think, and they can go as surface level or as deep as they want, but having opportunities to also incorporate their stories. So when it's time for the difficult topics to come up, they're going to have more empathy for one another. And that's why it's so important to build that community in the classroom. In my role as a dean, I'm always building community with my team, because I know that when things get difficult, it's going to be easier for us to have those difficult conversations, because there's been trust that's been built, there's been rapport. We may not agree with things, but we can have a conversation about it. So relationships and building community and trust, I think, is a foundation for being able to address those difficult moments later.
Hey, Glenn, I'm curious, in the different groups you've been in, because I know you've been involved in university, you're involved in your church. I mean, there must be times when there's, difficult challenges within those groups. Are there some strategies that have worked for you as you've interacted in those groups?
Wow, that's a tough one, Rob. I can remember what I was involved in the Boy Scouts of America, and I was involved in a leadership group. And it was at the time that Boy Scouts of America was deciding whether or not to accept girls into the program. Not sure if anyone knows that or not, but girls are now allowed to be part of Boy Scouts of America. and can actually make Eagle Scout. But I attended a district meeting or actually LA Council meeting to talk about that. It was also talking about LGBTQ members being admitted to Boy Scouts, not just girls, but all members of the LGBTQ members. So I was well prepared to go in there, assuming that I was going into a very conservative organization, Boy Scouts of America, but was I was pleasantly surprised to find out that the LA Council leadership was actually, I didn't need to make my long-winded speech to them because they were already leaning towards the side that I wanted them to decide on. But in organizations, I think it's really important to listen to what people's concerns are. And oftentimes people's concerns, while they're spinning around in their head, are really daunting and scary and everything. But once they verbalize them and you actually talk about the concerns, that it becomes less scary and less threatening. At my church, we were considering whether or not to participate in a program called Safe Parking, which was a place for people living in their cars to be able to use our church parking lot at night, so they'd have a safe place to sleep at night. And I was one of the leaders in the church, and there are lots of concerns about, gee, is it going to bring crime? Who are these people who are coming into our lot? But having all the facts of what this program was going to do, that one, the program vetted every person who would stay in the parking lot, that there would be a security guard there all night long in case anything happened, that we would limit it to only 10 cars being in our parking lot to start out to see how that goes. And the fact that the organization said that at a moment I could make one phone call and the program would end that day. But being prepared with all the facts and letting people voice all of their concerns, and when people say, "Oh, but this could happen," and you just acknowledge, yes, that could happen. And I actually spoke at other churches trying to promote this program at other churches, and people would say, "Well, this could happen." I go, "Well, yeah, it could happen, but it hasn't happened at our church, and we've been doing this for 2 years." And they'd say, "But this could happen." Well, yeah, that could happen too, but in our experience, it hasn't happened in our church. And just being prepared with facts to address fears is pretty important. So I don't know if that helps or not.
Yeah, the second part of the question I'm going to ask Tyler and Aisha to respond to. The second one is, how do you support students who feel vulnerable? So I would invite you to think back to your early education years. And you already said you didn't really see yourselves in the history, but were there things that teachers did or you would have liked teachers to have done that would have better recognized who you are? And if you were uncomfortable, how they handled that?
Well, I just got to say, I appreciate what both of Glenn and Blanca just said. And one of the things that kind of resonates with me is this idea that you kind of have to be on the offensive and not the defensive, right? Like allowing somebody in their fear to dominate and take over, and then you responding to that, right? And allowing that to deter what the goal is and the objective is of the session, really just like defeats the purpose, right? And so I think being able to acknowledge what they're saying and then pivoting back to what the objective is, and like, hey, we can talk after class about that, right? I think was really helpful for me to hear that shared. And just as far as vulnerabilities, I mean, I think, oftentimes just seeing somebody that's like me or from a similar group to me, so like having a guest speaker and somebody that's gone through an experience that can come in and just share their own experience, I think makes it easier for folks that might feel a little bit more vulnerable to speak up and share. So that's just kind of a thought that I had, maybe that you could take with you as you navigate that space and trying to make people feel as comfortable as possible. And I would never force people to speak about their experiences either, right? Because some people just aren't ready, and even you feel like you might have done everything that you could do to prepare people, to share it, but I mean, I would just be mindful not to put people on the spot on such sensitive topics, about at least specifically about their own experiences, but maybe provide an alternative form for them to be able to share. So maybe a reflection piece, like something in writing that they could share with you individually as opposed to in front of the whole class. So just some thoughts.
How about student support? Are you sure you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I think right now when I think of ways to support students, I think of Muslim students in California having, I believe it's more than half of Muslim students in California when polled say that they've been bullied. So also keeping a safe place for students that are in a minority, whether they're LGBTQ plus kids, someone from a minority ethnicity or religion. Sometimes when really big things happen in the news, they ripple through our communities. So I know that a lot of students at the mosque right now felt really left out when their schools made a super solid statement of sympathy towards Israel, but all these months later have made no such thing towards Palestine, when that's something that affects Muslims every day. Like, people are really sad over that right now. That's what we're talking about in the mosque, being really sad about that. And so just making sure that there's some sort of safe place for that student, or a chance to pull them aside and say, hey, how are you doing? In the month of Ramadan, you can make space for your students by asking if they're fasting, seeing if they want or have had a chance to set up a opportunity to sit in a library instead of going to the lunchroom. Sometimes Muslim kids get forced to go to the lunchroom and watch everyone else eat, when thoughtful schools will let them usually go to the library instead. They might get an exemption from PE or different things. So just being thoughtful about where all your students are and giving them a chance, particularly one-on-one, to say how they're feeling about some heavy thing that was brought up in class or is going on in the news that might be affecting them.
The point that Aisha just made about the space is so important. And I think even CSUMB is a good example of that. So when I attended CSUMB, there was a higher proportion or population of African American students. And the school has seen a decline of African American students. And so I've been engaged with faculty and administrators around trying to address some of those issues associated with that. And it's like a chicken or egg situation, right? Because there's this discussion around, well, do we need to focus on recruitment of Black students, or do we need to focus on the recruitment and hiring of Black faculty and administrators, right? And it's, of course, it is absolutely both. But it's like something, just speaking to it more directly, it's something very front and center of, I think, something that exists within an institution that you all are a part of today. These are discussions that are happening right now. And I know when I was going there, it was helpful to have those spaces so that I could reflect with people that were going through similar experiences than I, that identified in the same way as I, right, that were seen similarly as the world sees us, to others in the space. So it was super helpful to have that that space where I felt safe and I could reflect with other people that were from the same disadvantaged group that I was, to be able to just feel safe and sharing that information and reflecting on it. So I appreciate you sharing that, Aisha.
And in the class, is there any other burning question you want to ask before I let these people kind of share their final thoughts to all of you that we haven't touched on? Okay. So in your final thoughts, one of the broader questions that we've all asked here is, what are some ways that I can better incorporate the teaching of all these different topics or different groups of people into the classroom? So in your final comments, maybe you could address those types of things, and anything else that you want to share in response here. And Aisha, why don't we have you go first, and then you can, go back to your cooking or whatever else you need to do. I appreciate you being here on Ramadan, and thank you for enhancing our lives, because we better understand it now from your perspective, because you're in the middle of it.
Yeah, just sitting here hungry. Everyone send me messages and telling me what you're eating so I can live vicariously. No, thank you so much for having me here, Rob. I truly, really appreciate and admire everyone on this panel. I never feel like I have enough experience or anything to be here with you all, and I learn from you every single time. Also, because I didn't have coffee, I think you have to tell me the question again. I'm sorry. I'm usually writing them down, but I was DMing.
Final
Tyler.
words of wisdom or ways to incorporate these topics in the classroom.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Really just thank you for wanting to be teachers. Right now, I don't feel like it's well compensated enough in the United States, and hopefully, inshallah, God willing, as we say, that'll change someday, because you all truly deserve it, and it's heroes work, and it's shaping really important moments for a lot of young people. And I know that teachers are the reason that I graduated high school. I had kind of a hard senior year. Teachers were the reason that I had such a passion for helping other people, and why I loved going to libraries and learning more, and how I first learned about evolution, because I went to a school that taught us creationism. Like, teachers helped me find all of the information I wanted to know in the world. And I'm really super grateful that you are doing this work. I hope you get a chance to include lots of people. And just another fun Ramadan fact for everyone. Yes, Ramadan right now, this is the first day, March 11th, although sometimes in the US, there's some mosques and places that are not starting today, they're starting tomorrow. It's a whole fun Islamic law fact that comes up every year, but Ramadan goes forward 10 days every year. I always have somebody who is like, wait, how is Ramadan in March? I thought it's in June. And it's like, yeah, it was in June, like 7 years ago. And then in 6 years, it's going to be around Christmas. And it takes 33 years to go through the whole cycle. So next year in 2025, it'll be just the solid month of March, and then it'll go forward a little bit in February. So thanks for including people, being kind to each other, and you all are my favorite. And at 7:13, I will be eating and having coffee. So me.
All right, Tyler, how about your final comments and thoughts, and then Blanca, and then Glenn, you can be the final words here.
Did you see the hearts? Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's so cool. It's like on the iPhone now, if you do like a thumbs up, it like does I don't know if anybody's noticed that, but anyways, I just want to echo Aisha's comments. I mean, seriously, you all do amazing work, and I'm sure that we can all reflect on an experience where a teacher has made a difference in our lives. I was highlighting Obama and sharing my my transition into falling in love with politics, but it was really this professor that kind of set up this environment, and then Obama came along after that, that really made the difference. And so just know, I just encourage you to not look at this experience as a job. You can and will make a difference in at least one person's life, right? Think about it in that way. We're here to make society a better place, and 100% teachers do not get paid enough. I mean, our budgets, particularly at the state and national level, are a little bit lopsided, and it's unfortunate. I wish that we could do more for you in this setting, but as shared earlier, we all have a voice and we all make a difference. And I'm a huge supporter of labor groups, so I just encourage you to be involved with your labor union, and it can be a really productive space to help move things in the right direction by advocating for yourselves. And in return, that's about your students. So just keep doing wonderful, amazing things. And if you ever need me for whatever reason, I love doing things like this. It's one of my favorite parts of being an elected official. So Rob has my contact information. I can also put my email in the chat. So if you ever, need me to stop by a class, or you want to chat more about, you know, something personal about your own experience and just reflecting, or ask me follow-up questions, I'd be more than willing to have some additional discussion. So thank you all for what you're doing, and I wish you all the best of luck in finishing your studies.
Yeah, and if you're registered to vote in Monterey, you'll see Tyler on your
That
ballot,
part,
right?
thank you. I didn't pay him to do that. He just did that on his own. So
We've been talking about the importance of voting. Yeah.
And if you know anybody that lives in Monterey, that part. So.
It's all about recruitment and finding people you're confident with. There
It
you
really
go.
is.
Yeah. All right, on to Blanca.
Well, first I want to say thank you for being teachers. Thank you for going into the teaching profession. We need you. And we really, I know this is a difficult time for teachers and teacher education, but we need you. Our young students need you. And one, I think, piece of advice I'd want to share is with your students, share your story first. Be vulnerable. Show them that it's okay. And I am going to just share, I'm not going to share my story, but I'm going to share a storyboard. You could do something as simple as this, and you can talk about it for 5 minutes, or you could talk about it for an hour. But I think seeing pictures of you as their teacher and who you are and why you chose your teaching profession is a great way to start your classes. And then you can give them a little index card, and you can ask them 3 questions that they can write about themselves. And then that could just be a way you keep them in a little box. You know, their preferred name, their preferred pronouns, their favorite whatever, you know, their favorite sport, anything to get them to, for you to get to know them is really important. So that would be my kind of, my words of wisdom. It worked for me when I was a teacher tremendously. I still keep in touch with my students that I had my very first class in 1996. So
Blanca, could you share with us one of your photos, actually? And by the way, all of my colleagues here have said this already, but like I agree. Like I love this group of folks because we've done this a couple of times now, and I get to learn something new about each of you. I would love to just have you pull that back up and share with us one of the photos that might stick out to you in this space.
share this.
Well, you talk to us about 1 or 2 of them, huh? Is that what you're saying, Tyler?
Okay, so multiculturalism. So I'm Mexican. My husband is Palestinian and Ecuadorian. So he's and a lot of other things, but he's that's how he identifies. So our boys are a mix, and our boys are Saeed and Amir. So they have Arabic names, and that was really important to Ferris, who's my husband. So the way that we kind of agreed on is that my grandmother, who's up here, who's one of my biggest role models in my life, I said it's okay to have Arabic names, but my grandmother has to be able to say their names. So that's why Amir is very easy in Spanish, and Saeed is too. That's not how you pronounce them in Arabic, but you can easily say it. So yeah, that, and this is my dad and my mom and my siblings and my cousin, and this is a really important, family is important to me. This is during the social justice with my kids, during the pandemic, going out to the farm workers and handing out PPE equipment, gift cards, sanitizing. Like we did all that while during the pandemic because social justice is very important to me. So this is a Watsonville Canning strike that my mom was part of. There's me with Dolores Huerta. And there's me as a almost 3-year-old before I came to the US. And that is me at San Jose State getting my doctorate degree.
Oh, that reminds me of the story you didn't share, but could you share the story of almost being deported?
Yes, so my dad was caught working in the strawberry fields, and so I was, I was undocumented. My mom was undocumented. My brother was born here, so they took us to court in San Francisco, and I was interpreting for my parents. My parents got a lawyer, like a pro bono lawyer. Her name was Sherry, still remember her, Jewish woman. She, but what I want to share is when I got to the stand and the judge was asking me questions, it was all about, what do you want to study? What do you want to learn? What do you want to be when you grow up? Do you know anybody in Mexico? Have you been back to Mexico? And I had not been back since I was 3, and I was now like 10 or 11. And at the end of the day, the judge asked the lawyer to help our family get residency through my brother, and didn't deport us. And he said it was because of me, because he said my life was here, and it was evident, like, that our life had been here and we had been here for so long, and that it would be disruptive to separate us. And we ended up later getting residency through the amnesty program in the Reagan era administration.
Thanks. Glenn, your final thoughts and words of wisdom.
Wow, wisdom. I'm old, Rob, so I guess I'm supposed to have some wisdom. So I didn't mention that I'm actually, I really appreciate all you being here and going into the profession of teaching. I love teachers so much that I married one. She was an elementary school and special ed teacher for over 30 years. And so one of the things I learned from her is that class time is limited. So what you teach during that time is important. And what is not taught is less important. So for a child such as me to feel important, I think it's important that their histories be shown, be discussed in your classroom. So maybe that could be done by each child doing their own personal history, their own family history. Maybe that could be a project where they talk about that in class. And that's a way that their history can be recognized in the classroom. And I also want to say that I'm retired, and I think it's an important resource that each of you can draw upon. If any one of you gets into a classroom and wants me to come up, and I live in Southern California, but I'd be willing to drive up to wherever you are and share the Japanese American history story. I've got time. I can make time to do those kinds of things. So don't forget about the retirees there. They're a valuable resource. My wife still goes into classrooms and helps on Read for America Day, and she helps grade papers, and she helps create bulletin boards. So you've got resources out there. Look for the retirees. They're a valuable resource, and we're looking for important things to do. So don't forget about us old folks. We still have something to contribute. And just to reiterate what everyone else has said on this panel, I love this panel. This panel is awesome to me. You guys are close to my heart. So good seeing you all again. Aisha, I hope you have a good dinner tonight. You're making me hungry just thinking about it.
Right, go have some water for me. I tell you, Sunset, the best glass of water I've had in my life, right there.
Can you actually not drink water even?
No, we're super famous for that. I actually am probably going to order this hoodie because it's like a Muslim meme thing where it says like not even water. Yeah, we're super proud of that.
Wow, that's dangerous.
I mean, it's just sunrise to sunset. Technically, Islamic law is flexible enough that like if you lived in the north where the sun didn't go down, you could just fast by Mecca time. That's also why I studied Islamic law, and that is the advice for Muslims in space. You're welcome.
Well, again, I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules. Even though some of you are retired, it's still fitting into your other schedule. You've certainly enlightened all our lives. The importance of sharing our stories is so important for all of us. So I just invite everybody in the class to thank the speakers here, and you all get to take a break till 6:15 and we'll come back. So I'm going to stop the recording.